Okay, so today, finally, we are going to talk about sex. It's about time. You can't do a class on love, right, without approaching this topic. And Irigaray has a really interesting, also very poetic take on it. And so I'm very happy to give you guys this kind of upper level sex education class, right? I'm sure you all had to go through the grind of sex education in, I guess, 8th grade, I think that's when it's given, which is a terrible age to give it. I mean, I have horrible nightmares from my sex education classes where it was basically the idea was, you know, don't have sex. And if you do, here are all the diseases that are going to happen to you, right? That's basically the summary of how sex education was taught. I don't know if it's still the same today, but it's not great, right? You don't really, you get more into the medical aspect, you get into all the diseases, you know, it's horrific, how to not get pregnant. It's all very much a negative approach, I think, and a fear-based approach to sex, right? Nothing is taught, barely anything about intimacy, nothing about lovemaking, right? So we have a very restricted education, right? And then we try to fill that gap, perhaps through movies, music, sometimes porn. And very often these are not the places to go, right? If you want to really know what makes you an expert in lovemaking, how do you connect, how do you create intimacy, right? These are things that are not really taught out there, right? You really need to find the right place and the right person, but in the general popular culture, very difficult to find. So I'm really happy that today, at least the 15 of you or 16 are going to have some good upper level education on this. And so we're gonna start shortly. In essence, what Irigaray is saying really throughout the text, just if I were to give you in a nutshell, she's really talking about sex as an art, right? Sex is not something that, you know, is just gonna happen, right? Intimacy is not something that's just gonna happen, right? It's a whole, you need to develop a certain artisanship. There is a way to do it. Very much like a musical instrument, right? You have to learn your musical instrument. You have to know your musical instrument before you can have an amazing sound, right? It's the same when you're intimate with a person. You really have to learn them like a musical instrument. And this takes, of course, a receptivity. It takes the humility to learn from your mistakes, and it takes time, right? So these are, right, this is really, and so Irigaray is going to give us a few tips, but ultimately, right, your partner, of course, is going to be your best guru, right, in this. And so towards the end of class, well, maybe I'll mention them now. So this type of sex education, right, how to make love and so forth, we are not really teaching it in school today, you know, in our society, but in the ancient times, this was part of the curriculum, right? There are a number of treatises that were written, mostly for men, right? In order to teach them, right, how to make love to a woman. And I'm going to put 3 of them in the chat that I would really suggest you look into if you want to deepen some of the things we talk about today. You have in the Hindu tradition, you have the Ananga Ranga by Kalyana Mala. And this is similar to, I'm sure you all know the Kama Sutra, of course, which is everywhere in Barnes and Noble. I like this one better. It's a little more, there's a little more text, there's a little more explanation. So I prefer the Ananga Ranga, but it's this kind of similar text on how to make love. So it's written for men, for usually young princes who are in the court, right? And this is teaching them, right? How do you make love to a woman in a way that she will appreciate you, right? Similar, again, also for males, right, is the Perfumed Garden. I mean, we females can get some tips, obviously, but this is really written primordially for males by Sheikh Nefwazi. So this is in the Muslim tradition, right? I should get one from the Jewish tradition, but I know in the Talmud, there's a lot that is written about lovemaking, actually. So I need to look it up, but you can already check, you know, Talmudic writings. The rabbis really covered this topic, right? And I would need to get some of the references. I haven't looked into it, but I know there's a lot there. And this is, by the way, in Jewish context, right, in Jewish circles, this is taught, right? There's a whole, right, before people get married, they go through some of these Talmudic writings and they learn, right, how how to do this. And then a more contemporary writer, right, which I love very much, Anais Nin, and this is in favor of the sensitive man. This is a fabulous book where she's speaking really about the new woman that Irigaray is developing, right? This new emancipated woman, right, who is in tune with her desires, who is independent, who is, right? So with such a woman, you need a new man, right? And so Anais Nin is really developing, you know, what would this new man look like who can partner with such a woman, right? Who is emancipated, who is a modern woman, right? And she talks about beautifully, has a whole essay on that, the new man, and then she has a whole essay on lovemaking, on how to make love to a woman. So, and this is contemporary. This is Anais Nin, of course, I mentioned her before. She's a French writer from the early 20th century. Again, I told you she wrote a lot of erotica, but really what I think her masterpiece is her journals, right? So you can also look into Anais Nin's journals as a woman, if you want to really enter the psyche of a woman who is becoming this new woman, right? She's moving from the old-fashioned, traditional notion of womanhood to this modern woman, and she's exploring, and really you can see her whole journey there. It's a fascinating text. So yeah, so these are the texts, you know, you can go if you want to go deeper from what we do in today's class, but today we'll set the groundwork for some of these texts. Okay, so today what we're going to look at, which is fascinating, is Irigaray, interestingly, she's not a moral philosopher. She's not going to tell you, this is sin, right? And this is, you know, remember, she's writing in a post-marriage world, right? She's writing in the context of a liberated France, right? In France, in the society of the French culture, where, you know, the church really has no more role to play when it comes to sex, right? But she's still thinking we still need to, there's still a way to do this, right? It's not anything goes. And so she's really going to talk in this context of the post-marriage society. But at the same time, she's not going to be judging, right? Because she's talking to a secular public, right? Who is sick and tired of religion. She's not going to use the moral path where you're judging this is sinful sex and this is right, this is the only type of sex you can have and so forth, right? She's actually going to be very objective, but what she's going to do is look at it from an ethical perspective, not from a moral religious perspective. She's going to look at sex from an ethical perspective, and she's going to outline 3 levels. So she's not going to say this is bad and this is sinful. She's going to say, well, this is level 1, right? Beginner sex, right? And then she's going to outline level 2, intermediate sex. So this is when you become a little more proficient. And then she goes off to level 3, which for her is expert, mastery sex, right? Okay, so we're going to look at these 3 levels. And again, she's not judging, she's describing, and then she's giving an ethical analysis. She's looking at it as an ethicist. What are some of the issues? What are some of the problems, ethical problems? But she's not looking ever at sex in terms of transgression or sin, right? Okay, so are you guys ready to get into this fascinating topic? Let me see you on the gallery. Wave at me if you're all ready and excited. Okay. Great. I need to see more faces. Noble, Pierre, Mark, Leibovitz, Kushmakova, Celia, Park. Okay. Great. All right. So let's begin with the first. So each one of these levels, she's gonna talk about a particular philosopher who's written about sex, and she's gonna criticize them, right? So she's gonna say that philosopher is on that level, and then go to intermediate, that philosopher is on that level, and then finally, in the expert level, she's going to quote the last philosopher whom she agrees with, right? So let me write the 3 names. So the first level will be with Jean-Paul Sartre, right? Then we have, this is a long name, Maurice Merleau-Ponty. This is the second name. This is intermediate. And then the last mastery level is Emmanuel Levinas. So for her, level 1 is the level that Jean-Paul Sartre is exploring, is the level he's writing about. She disagrees with Sartre that this is the only way to have sex. This is the only outcome, right? She's going to heavily criticize him. And then she'll move to level 2 with Maurice Merleau-Ponty. So she says, okay, this is better, but still there's some issues there. He's writing only on that level. He's not going deeper. He's not pushing further. And then she's going to encounter Emmanuel Levinas, and that's going to be her favorite. And he's going to be really her mentor. He's really somebody that has deeply influenced her writings. And so she's going to kind of start with what he has to say and then elaborate on this. So let's begin at level 1. Now, what's interesting is each of these levels, you can classify them in Buberian terms. So level 1, let me write this down here. Level 1 with Sartre, right? I'll just say it in French, okay? Sartre is going to be an I-it relationship, right? Level 2 with Merleau-Ponty is going to be, we'll see an I relationship. And then level 3, which is the highest level, right, with Lévinas, is going to be an I-you relationship. So she's going to really go up the levels and say, okay, this is when sex is an I-it relationship, right? And then this is when sex is an I relationship. And each time she's encouraging us to move deeper, further up, right, to a sexual relationship, which is an IU, which has the structure of an IU relationship, right? Okay, so let's begin with Sartre. This is the I-it, and let's read a little bit what he has to say. Okay, so I'm on page 18, and I'm gonna start on the top where he says, if this is the case. So wave at me if you're there, page 18 in 2B2, if this is the case. Okay, good. All right. So she says this, right? So she's talking about Sartre. She's talking about something he wrote in his master work, which is Being and Nothingness. And she's going to criticize him, right? So she says this, if this is the case, how do I desire the other and enter into a carnal relationship with him? So she's asking the question to Sartre, right? By the way, is it okay if I pronounce this French way? Anybody have it? Are you okay? Wave at me if you're okay if I pronounce all the names in the French, because I can't say Sartre and Merlot. I'm just gonna say it French way, and hopefully you will follow, right? Okay, so this is, so she's quoting Sartre, right? Where he is saying, in Being and Nothingness, that's his main work, Jean-Paul Sartre maintains that the only possible way, right, to have a lover, to have an intimate relationship, is to enchant the other. It is a matter of making his consciousness descend into his body, of paralyzing his liberty in the factuality of a body. In other words, the only way to really, what Sartre is saying, he's really describing how sex is done in how most people engage in sex, right? Saying, well, most of us, when we're dealing with sex, we are really, in a way, making the other, in a way, paralyzing the other when it comes to their liberty. In other words, what he's describing for Irigaray is the I-it relationship, is a relationship where the other is no more than an object. He is stuck, she says here, in the factuality of his body. In other words, he is not a you, right? We see them as an object. So basically, right? So then she continues, second paragraph, thus I can possess the other. And according to Sartre, the fulfillment of desire does not exist without such a possession. So here she's talking about a kind of sexual encounter where in a way you are dominating the other. You are in a way controlling or possessing or seducing, manipulating the other, right? And the other in a way is being controlled and seduced and manipulated. And that is how you are going to engage in this relationship. So let me translate a little bit, right? We've read the passage. In essence, right, what Sartre is saying is that most of our sexual relationships are an I-it relationship, where the other is nothing more than a sex object or an object of a person that is there or to please me, to fulfill a need. Okay, so let me say that again, right? Sartre is describing a relationship where the other is just an object, the object of my desire and the object that will fulfill my desires, right? And this, she's not going to say this is immoral and so forth. She's going to say, well, this is, this is how we all begin. We all start there, right? We all begin when you're in high school and you have a crush and you really want to be in a relationship and you just want to have that other, right? Because you desire them so intensely, you really have to have this and you're just going to go and get it, right? So this is a very spontaneous urge that we have to just take and have them for us, right? And have them so that they can fulfill a need or a passion or an impulse or a desire, right? So she's saying most of us, however, get stuck on that level, right? Including Sartre, right? So she's going to say there is a problem, right? With this attitude where you are only thinking of the other as someone who fulfills your needs, right? As someone that you have to somehow seduce into, fulfilling your needs. So let me give you the criticism, and then we'll look at examples of this in our culture, right? There's many, many examples. We are really, a lot of us, our culture is very much on the level still of the I, it. So here's the criticism. Last paragraph. Let me make sure you're with me. The other is and remains. Hand in the screen if you're there. Last paragraph of 18. Okay, thanks. Good. So now this is Irigaray responding to Sartre, right? Sartre, who says, well, most sex is simply objectifying. It's about getting somebody in your bed so they can fulfill you and then you feel better. And she says, no, this is not, this is a very low level. This is a very primitive level of sex. This is a very beginner level, she says, because the other is and remains transcendent to me through a body, through intentions and words foreign to me. You who are not and will never be me or mine, right? You should be reminded here of the Song of Songs, right? She's saying the other can never be just there for you, can never be your thing, can never be your object, right? You're missing the other when you engage sexually with the other in that way, right? As long as you are in an I-it relationship with the other, you're missing the whole personhood of the other, right? Basically, she's saying this, right? She continues, last sentence, the will to possess you corresponds to a solitary and solipsistic dream which forgets that your consciousness and mind do not obey the same necessities. So she's saying, as long as you're engaging in I-it relationships when it comes to sex, you will be alone, fundamentally solitary. You will have many people around you. Maybe you have a hookup every night, but you will remain fundamentally alone because you have not been able to reach the personhood of the other. You've missed that, right? Okay. So let's look at some examples. There are many, right? Some of you mentioned already in your essays, right? We live in a hookup culture, right? Where we are going to have, right? We have the app Tinder, for example, right? And you can just swipe, right? You can basically get a night just by swiping. It's there, it's available. And although some people use Tinder to date and so forth, to get to know the person, many people use Tinder for hookup, right? So, and a hookup is nothing more than I'm lonely, I'm bored, let me find somebody so I can have an interesting evening, right? So that's the definition of a hookup. Emotions are not necessarily involved, right? And so forth. So she's saying, okay, well, that's fine, go for it if you need to, but know this, right? Be informed that at that moment, you are really remaining on the level of the I-it, right? You're not going into the deeper possibilities. The other is just there to fulfill a need for one night or for one weekend, or maybe, for a short period of time. And she's saying, right, in that sense, you are missing the deeper layers that you could explore, right? Any type, right? Any type of sex which is really to fulfill a need, right, comes in that category. So, for example, there are many other ways that we do this, right? The idea of having sex to give ourselves a sense of power, right? This is another way to have an I-it relationship, right? So for example, as long as I don't have sex, I feel like a loser, let me just go have sex, right? So especially in high school, the pressure is very high. You guys are beyond that, of course, but the pressure can be high to get a partner just because you look stupid in the eyes of society if you're single, right? So you're gonna find a way to get laid so that you don't look stupid, right? I-it, right? Another way that especially women use sex is to create commitment. So they will sleep with a person, maybe even have a child, so that the person will love them. Again, this is I-it, right? On the virtual level, right, pornography is an I-it relationship, right? For those of you or us who were wondering what's really wrong with porn, right? Irigaray gives us some tools, right, to reflect on pornography, where the woman in these media, right, is usually portrayed as an object, right, a sex object, which is there simply to fulfill the desires of the man, right? In most porn flicks, right, you have the woman working really hard, right, to please the guy. So already the actress, right, is an it, but it will seep into our lives, right? We will get used to seeing sex as an I-it relationship, and then we will expect this in our real life relationships, right? So watching porn can actually begin, right? Whatever you're watching, in a way, the I-it relationship that is being portrayed can begin to seep into our expectations, right? Then we go out into the real world and we expect things to be like in the porn flick, right? And we continue to objectify and to see the partner as the one who is there to fulfill our needs, right? So this is the danger, right? So these are some of the many ways, right, that we are on the level of the I-it, and where we are still, right, according to Irigaray, the beginner level, right? Again, she's not judging, she's describing, she's analyzing, and she's saying, this is what is going on here and here, and you need to know this, right? You need to be aware that when you are in the Tinder culture or the porn, or, you know, engaging in porn, this is, you know, you are really, in a way, hardwiring yourself for an I-it relationship, right? You are really becoming hardwired for this type of relationship. I personally call it fast food sex, right? I had a friend, we were talking once. I mean, he really killed me with that conversation. I asked him the question, I was like, hey, I have a question. As a woman, this intrigues me. Why is it that you men, and of course women do that too, but I put it all on him. I said, why is it that you men can have sex with someone you don't love, right? Why is it that you like, how can you do that? Like, I was perplexed. I was like, that sounds awful. And he answered, he said, listen, when you're hungry and you have a craving for pizza, right? It doesn't matter if the pizza is hot or cold, right? I don't care if the pizza is, you know, in a nice fine dining place, or if it's in the fridge, right? And, you know, if I'm hungry, I'm gonna just take cold pizza, right? So then I'm thinking to myself, which one am I? Am I hot pizza or am I cold pizza? Like, I'm starting to evaluate my relationship with this guy, right? So in essence, right, this is something that this is very common, right? I'm hungry, let me get some cold pizza. No, there's no emotion, there's no connection, but it's pizza, right? So Irigaray is saying, okay, you know, that's fine, but just know that at that moment you are really formatting yourself, right, for the I-it, for an I-it encounter, right? This is going to be an I-it encounter, and you are therefore, the more you engage in it, the more formatted you become. So I call it fast food sex. Why? Because the problem with fast food is that once you get used to fast food, you don't like real food anymore. I know this because I live with a teenager right now who has an addiction to fast food. And anytime I'm gonna bring him like some of my healthy, you know, home cooked, vegetarian or vegan, he's gonna be like, nah, I'm just gonna go get some Popeyes. I'm gonna go get some, right? So I know that once you get addicted to fast food, it's very hard to go back to healthy food. In fact, myself, I couldn't switch, right, to vegetarian diet or being whatever plant protein diet until I stopped for a while the meat and the fast food, right? I had to actually stop for a while, and my body needed time to switch before I could actually appreciate, right, a plant-based diet. So very similar. If you've become, you know, if you've gone, I'll be with you in a second, Rudolph. But if you've become in a way trapped, right, in the I-it Tinder culture, it's not the end of the world, right? If you take a little time to reformat yourself, you can then go back and have a healthy relationship, right? It's always possible to transition, but you cannot transition if you keep eating the fast food. There has to be a moment of abstinence, right, where you're cleansing your body so that you can develop a healthy taste for a healthy relationship, right? I've seen that so often. It's very sad. Somebody who has, for example, had a porn addiction or is used to hookups, it's very hard for them to appreciate, right, the intricacies of a real life relationship, right? So there needs to be, it's possible to transition, obviously, of course, right? It's always possible to transition from fast food to, you know, a healthy diet, but there has to be a period of abstinence before you can switch, right? Rudolph.
Do you contribute what you just said to the fact that we are in a fast food culture right now? And is this something new? Or would we be able to say that even a guy like Aristotle had unlocked the secret already?
Of what? Unlock the secret of what?
Of delaying gratification, of confusing pleasure with true happiness.
Right, yeah. I mean, the Greeks, everybody has been talking about it. and they had more of a sense, I mean, in the ancient cultures, well, there was a lot of also, in Greek culture, there was a lot of excesses also. And by the way, we saw this in the symposium, the excesses that there were and how Socrates was taking a step back, right? So in every culture, I think there was excesses. And I mean, certainly you go back to the Greeks. I mean, they're the experts on I-it relationship when it comes to this kind of exchange we saw, right? Between young men and older men. This is I-it, right? And Socrates was aware. And that's why he pulled back, right? So every culture has their I-it version, right? You can be married and be in an I-it relationship. And this has been the case for women for centuries, to be an it in the marriage, right? So this is not, we are not the only ones, right? This is something that has happened century after century in all kinds of media, right? You can be in a gay relationship or homosexual relationship like the Greeks, right? You can be in a married context. You can be now in the hookup culture. The I-it is always going to be there. It's always going to be a temptation, right? Because it's fast food, it's easy, it's fun. I agree, right? I want to get a burger occasionally, right? So we're and Irigaray again is saying it's not, there's nothing wrong in the sense that this is how we come to it. Like this is how, when you have no experience, you're going to come to it like that, right? But she's encouraging us, right, to move from level to level. So any questions on this first level with Sartre, which is the I-it, which our culture certainly has many, many examples of. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, so now moving on to the second level. This is intermediate sex, right? This is Maurice Merleau-Ponty. So she's going to quote him. She's going to say, okay, he's highlighting here the elements of that level, but he's still not going far enough, according to her. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first I'm going to basically summarize what he says, because it's a bit complicated, convoluted to read, and then we're going to read her critique, right? In essence, what Merleau-Ponty is saying in his work and in what she's quoting, and this is now, it's a step higher because now we are in a relationship, right? This is not just hookups, this is not just porn. This is a relationship, but it's a relationship where both partners are dissatisfied with the sex. In other words, they have sex, but they're not, and it feels good more or less, but they're not feeling a deeper connection has been created by that sexual intimate moment, right? And I think a lot of us fall into that level sooner or later, especially in our culture, and I'll explain why in a second. But very often you will find yourselves in relationships where you love them, right? You're together, you're more or less faithful, but you're sensing that the sex is not bringing you where you want to go. You're sensing there should be more to this, right? This is it's fine. I like it. I enjoy it, but there should be, you feel there should be more. The connection is not created. There's no ecstasy. It's just it's sex, right? So Merleau-Ponty is saying, right, and Merleau-Ponty kind of is very fatalistic about it. He says, well, that's it. That's sex. You cannot go further. That's how it is. You can never really get to the other in the sexual encounter. You can never really reach them. And so he's very pessimistic, and he just kind of says, well, that's how it is. You want to, but you can never truly reach them. And Irigaray is like, what the hell? Why you say that? Right? And so she's going to criticize him. And this is what she says. So here I'm on page 21. And I'm on the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph where it says, but the subject-object dichotomy. Who is with me? Put your hand in the screen. Okay, thanks. Okay, so she's commenting on him, on what he just said, and she says this, but the subject-object dichotomy also depends upon the manner in which sexuality is conceived. Maurice Merleau-Ponty considers sexuality as ambiguity and indeterminacy, which are related not only to the body, but to life in general. So she's kind of bringing up some of these points, which we didn't talk about, just mainly remember what I said. But here she says this, here's a criticism. As a result, sexuality does not favor the emergence of intersubjectivity. So let's underline that sentence because this is the key criticism. Can anyone tell me what intersubjectivity means? Let's see if I can get some of you to think about that word. What does intersubjective mean, or intersubjects? Anybody know what does inter mean? Think international, interrelational, Rudolph, go ahead.
I view it as an acceptance of both parties, not to look at each other objectively, but find a connection where both are fusing in the assurance that they're of equal wealth and worth.
Okay, good. You went a little deeper. I'll go there eventually, but for now, inter means between subjects. So she's saying the problem with Merleau-Ponty is that his definition of sex does not favor the in-between, the relational aspect, right? You are not connecting subject to subject in the way he's describing it. And she disagrees. She says, no, sex should become a way to connect deeply to the other, right? Are you following me, right? Let me make sure everyone got that. It's a little convoluted. You get what I'm saying about Merleau-Ponty, what he's saying, and then what, put your hand in the screen if you're with me. Okay, 2 people are with me, great. Okay, so basically, right, his idea of sex is that we can never really reach the other. We are condemned to be alone, right? Even if we are intimate with them, part of us will never reach part of them. That's what he says. Irigaray is like, no, I disagree with you. You're just lazy, right? We should make the encounter such that we can reach the other person deeply, right? And she's going to give us the tools for that in the last level, right? But for now, she's just criticizing, right? So let me now go and give us some examples of this. Concretely, what does this look like? Well, concretely, what it looks like is what I said before. You're in a relationship, it's committed, you both love each other, but somehow the sex is banal, is ordinary. It's not really, you don't feel a deeper connection with them, right, through that. And one of the reasons is this, and that's what Irigaray is trying to tell Merleau-Ponty. One of the reasons sex life can become ordinary is that we are more interested in taking than in offering when it comes to lovemaking, right? So let me explain. If you come to the lovemaking thinking this woman or this man, right, has to do this and this and this for me, right? If you're coming with the spirit that they have to bring you pleasure, that they are there to bring you pleasure, that they're there, that in fact, they should do this and they should do that, and she should wear that and he should do these things and so forth, and then you'll be good. But if you're coming with that spirit of I need to get my needs met or else, right, you're gonna end up in a very ordinary sexual relationship. Let me say that again, right? So if you're coming in the relationship, if you're coming in the bedroom with the idea that they need to fulfill me or else, because that's how a lot of us are, right? If they don't fulfill me sexually, I don't think it's gonna work. I'm out of here. I don't think we can make it happen, right? So a lot of us base everything on that. Huge expectations, right? So we come in and we're expecting the other person to fulfill us or else, right? If you're coming in like that, thinking that if they do not fulfill you on that level, the whole relationship is jeopardized, you are in the taker. You are in a taking mode. You are a taker, right? The shift is necessary psychologically if we're going to have a deeper sexual relationship. And Irigaray says, when you shift from taking to offering yourself, right? I am not there to be satisfied, but I am there to satisfy you, right? I am there to welcome you. I am there to give you a haven, right? I'm there for you. When you shift that, you are now making it possible to go deeper into deeper levels of intimacy, right? So it is very important. Ask yourself, right? Anytime you find yourself complaining under your breath, right, in your heart, that this sex is not satisfying, right? Ask yourself, am I taking or am I giving, right? And by the way, there's 2 ways to see this, right? The taking is I need to have my needs met here. There's offering and there's receiving. These are the 2 ways we can counter the taking. So I want to talk about it a little bit. I'm going to talk about it I'm going to follow her line of thought and talk about men, women, right? But of course, anybody can, any type of relationship can apply these concepts, right? But I'm just going to follow her line here. So let's look first at men. How can men shift their perspective, right, when it comes to the bedroom so that they can create intimacy? What Irigaray is saying is that man, instead of taking, must learn to offer himself, right? In other words, to realize that his sexual energy is a gift, right? He's not just there to have his needs met, he's there to also offer his love and especially his energy. I want to talk a little bit about male sexual energy because we don't talk about it so much in our culture. This is more something that people talk about in the East. But in general, we don't really develop this idea of male sexual energy, how powerful that energy is, how healing and rejuvenating that energy is, right? We talk about male sexual energy in very derogatory terms, like, oh, he's always, I don't know how you talk about it, but in general, right, we don't tend to have any type of sense of respect or honor when it comes to male sexual energy. In the Far East, which Irigaray is delving into, male sexual energy was considered to be the original energy of creation. This was the energy through which everything came to be. This was extremely powerful life force, right? And it just happens that men are inhabited by this life force. So you have to measure, I really want the men in the class to realize how powerful and rare and precious your sexual energy is, and how healing that energy can be to a woman, right? And many of us women, we enter relationships with heartbreaks, with baggage, with all kinds of pain and trauma locked into our bodies. And okay, I'm gonna get my pencil, just escaped. Yes, right. So we enter the relationship with a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma in our bodies. What men don't realize is that their energy actually, if they're offering it, can actually give profound healing to the female body, right? It is an energy which can unlock all kinds of stuck places. It can unlock creativity. It can unlock love. It can unlock all kinds of things in a woman, right? So I want the men to realize, right, this precious life force that has been entrusted to men, right? And to come and to offer it is the most beautiful gift you can do to a woman. It is a life transforming gift. It is a gift that can powerfully shift everything in her, right? And so in the Far East, right, a lot was, this energy was considered to be a very precious energy that you needed to guard and protect and cultivate and channel, right? And so, for example, in India, men were not allowed to have sex until they're 21, right? Because they were saying, no, this energy needs to be guarded, protected, channeled, right? And then they give them practices, right? How to channel that energy, how to master it, so that it doesn't overtake, because a very powerful life force, right? We have to recognize, I was walking by the ocean once. As a woman, of course, I'm locked out of the male body, right? It's a different experience, but I was at the ocean here at Long Beach, and it was a day where the waves were particularly strong. And I was walking there and I realized this is exactly what male sexuality is like. It's very powerful, right? And it can be extremely life-giving, right? But it's also very powerful, and it can destroy the same way, right? And so that's why the Far East, right, these ancient practices in the Far East, like India and China, they knew the potency of that energy, and they knew that energy can destroy the man, right? And so the man has to learn to master, to channel. And so I would invite, right, the men in the room, try to find a master, right, in the Far East that can help you through Tai Chi, through yoga, through these practices to channel and to guard this energy, because this energy, precisely, if it is pure, if it is powerful, can have such an impact on the woman, right? Now, turning to the ladies, right? A lot has been done on this now with a new woman, right? But I don't think we realize how beautiful our gift of receiving is, right, to the man. So the man gives, the woman receives, but we often don't realize, right? We have been taught, by the way, by the porn culture to give, right? I don't know if you realize, but very often men have expectations that the woman should give, do this, do that, turn around, do this, and so forth, right? So we don't realize that really the most beautiful gift we can offer a man is the gift of receptivity. Now, what does that look like, right? To receive a man is to receive without judgment, without criticism, without rejection, right? And very often as women, we're like, not like that. No, I don't like that. No, right? We get very picky, and sometimes we get we become somewhat rigid, like, oh no, I would never do that. Get the hell out of here with your ideas, right? So we tend to be very we can be very prude, right? And we tend to reject the man's, desire to play, the man's playfulness often when it comes to sex, right? We take things very seriously. So, but this ability to really receive and welcome the man in all of his, craziness and wildness and can be very, very healing for the man, right? We also have the power to heal. To the degree that you receive a man without judgment, right, is the degree that this man will find healing in your arms, right? Back to the Far East, I love the Far East when it comes to these things. There's a tradition in China, in the Taoist writings, that the woman, let me find my notes here. Yes, the woman actually was considered, because she could give birth, right? She was considered to be the gate to immortality, right? To the gate to the realm of the divine, because only the divine can create new life. And yet here's the woman creating new life. And so the woman's sexual organs were seen as a gate into the immortal, a gate into the realm of the gods, right? And so the man knew that if I can be with this woman and enter her and be intimate with her, I will access this immortality, right? There was a belief that and there was an encouragement to make love to a woman often, because that is how you ensure that you can become, right, live long, right? So the woman is considered to be, right, this sacred gate, which gives a man access to all of the resources of the divine, healing, rejuvenation, power, and so forth. But again, as a gate, it has to do with receiving, right? How do you, so ask yourself, right, if you feel that your man is becoming withdrawn, or if you feel that your man is, not interested in you anymore in that way, how good of a receiver have you been, right? So any questions on these two ideas of the man offering his energy, the woman receiving that energy, and the healing that can take place when both are willing and able to do that? Any questions on this part, on this commentary on Merleau-Ponty? Okay, so we are ready for the last part. Before I go to the last part, I want to talk briefly. Do I want to talk about that here? Yes. I want to talk briefly about intimacy, just as an epilogue, as a way to conclude Merleau-Ponty. Which the problem with Merleau-Ponty is he's saying there is no intimacy possible. There is no true connection possible. I want to talk about intimacy because we all know how to have sex, but we don't know how to build intimacy, right? And this will become a problem very quickly in the relationship, right? You will have sex, it will be okay, but you will find that you're missing the intimacy, which is what Merleau-Ponty is pointing out. And I want to give a very quick, tiny workshop on intimacy, because some of you have been talking about that to me in private, and I want to respond to that. It's interesting. In the Hebrew language, the word intimacy is the same root as the word sacrifice. This is interesting. It's the same root. For those who speak Hebrew, I'll just say it, right? The word for sacrifice is korban, and the word for intimacy is lekarov. Same root, right? These are the same, you see the same consonants, Q, B, N, right? So this is semantically, these words are related in the Hebrew language. So I want to go into what that means, right? I really have come to realize that intimacy is impossible without sacrifice. If you're not ready to sacrifice, to offer yourself up, right, to the other, you will not ever taste intimacy, right? And so what does it mean, the sacrifice, right? Does it mean you're going to be, going through this kind of death, ritual? No. Sacrifice is nothing but the offering up of your whole self. And we're going to talk about that in a second, a little more, right? So this is the readiness, I think, to offer yourself completely, with no plan B, with no exit, right? With no sharing left and right, right? Just all of me for you. Like the song, the song, what's his name? The pianist who's married to the, gosh, help me. What's his name? How is it? Love all of me, loves all of you, all your curves and all your edges. Who's that? Thank you, John Legend. Guys, go listen to that song. What's the name of this song, Kushmakova? It's a great song. All right. Do you know the song, Kushmakova? I'm glad somebody's listening to popular music. Where are you, Kushmakova? Yes. Oh, all of me? Okay, perfect. I want you to listen to that song because it's a very powerful song. It's a song about his wife, right? So all of me for all of you. This all is what it means to sacrifice, meaning all of me for you, right? So this is until you're ready, right, to really enter the relationship with no going back, right? No turning around, no exit, no plan B, no plan C, right? You're in it, all of you. The intimacy will be hard to reach. This is why commitment is important, which we'll talk about in a second. And this is why also polyamory is problematic. Not problematic, but is not going to reach. Polyamory can bring you a lot of things, not going to bring you intimacy. Let me explain. What is polyamory? When you have several partners at the same time. Now, if you're with a couple partners and they're with a couple partners, right? I agree that you will find a lot there. You will find comfort, you will find company, you will find companionship, you will find even love, right? You can love many partners. It's possible to love many people at once, right? What you will not find, I believe, is intimacy, right? Intimacy, this very deep closeness, is only possible through sacrifice, through sacrificial love, where you're able to immolate everything that is not that love. You're able to cut out anything that is not your beloved, right? And so while polyamory is interesting, if you're exploring yourself, if you're exploring, what kind of love do I need, or who am I as a lover? And if you need, if you're looking for companionship or even, human community, it will give you all of that, I agree. But intimacy is only possible through sacrifice, right? And so ultimate, and by the way, I want to continue on that because this is, by the way, the challenge of faithfulness, right? Because it takes this sacrifice, right? It's the idea that I will give you my all, and even though, right, and I'm going to really offer myself so we can have something, and even though you can never fulfill me completely, right? This is if you're with just one person, there is always the risk, and it will be there, that they cannot give you everything. This is why we go with different partners. They give me this, she gives me that, he gives me that, and so then I can have everything, right? The committed, faithful relationship, you will always be missing something, right? There will always be something your partner cannot give you. And this is the ultimate challenge. And this is where love steps in, right? I want to really emphasize this because I want us to really understand your partner will never completely fulfill you. And this is why we are tempted to cheat, right? Because that is happening. But if we were with someone who fulfilled us completely, what type of relationship would it be? They fulfill all my needs. What type of relationship is that between I, you? Donaldson.
I think it's I.
Exactly, right? So in a way, you don't want your partner to fulfill you completely, because otherwise you're just an I'm fulfilled, I'm good, we're happy, right? When there's a lack, this is when the possibility of love, of deep, profound love, can come and fill that lack, right? In other words, you will never learn to love if you're completely fulfilled, right? You only learn to love when there's a challenge, when there's something missing, and yet you love, right? That's the type of love that will bring you intimacy. Okay, I hope you guys got that. Let me say it again, right? Your love will not reach its depths if everything is going well. That's the point, right? If all your needs are fulfilled, there's no love there. It's just nourishment, right? Love comes when there's something missing, when there's a challenge, when there's a lack, and yet you choose to love, right? And at that point, your love has reached a very high level. And at that moment, intimacy is possible. So that's why I'm saying intimacy is only possible when you're not completely satisfied. Does that make sense? That's a paradox. Everybody following my paradox? Intimacy is only possible when not all of your needs are met. Does that make sense? When you're leaving this mindset that all your needs must be met, you're entering the mindset of love, where you're thinking more about the other person's needs, and that's when intimacy is possible, right? So that I just wanted to open this parenthesis, talk a little bit about intimacy, because it's a struggle for many of us, right? How do we create that? Why can't I have it? and so forth, right? Okay, now we go into the highest level. Any comments before we get to the level 3? Anybody need a clarification or a question? Okay, Levinas. So let's go there. So here she's going to start with Levinas, and she's going to basically talk. And actually, it's 4:13. So I'm wondering, should we take a short break before we get to Levinas? Because that's quite a chunk. Who wants a break before we go into Levinas? Who needs a break? Okay, who doesn't need a break? Who doesn't need a break? Okay, I need some response. So, and I need to see some faces. Yes, that would be nice. So who needs a break before we get to the next part? Put your hand in the screen. Okay, Donaldson, I think Fatakov. Who doesn't need a break? I just want to see him. Anderson doesn't need a break. Okay, Fatakov wants a break. Okay, let's take a short break. It's 2 minutes. So at 4:15, we're back, and now we're going to get into the third level. Okay, so let's give ourselves 2 minutes. Okay, great. So now we reached the level 3. So let's see so again, right? So she's going to start with Levinas, whom she loves, whom she believes is onto something when it comes to sexual relationship. And so what she's going to notice, I'll summarize briefly, is that Levinas talks about a certain way of touching, right? So, and this way of touching, meaning this way of lovemaking, is a way that will usher in, according to Irigaray, the IU relationship, right? So it's interesting because for her, the IU doesn't mean that you go through the institution of marriage. It doesn't mean anything like that, that you have to go through a church or a priest or whatever. She says, no, even in a secular context, right, which is France, even in a secular context, we can have a sacred marriage, right? We can have a sacred relationship if we just know how to touch each other, right? So it really has to do with a way of touching. And this way of touching, Levinas calls the caress. So the word caress, of course, means to caress, obviously, but it also encompasses this whole way of approaching the other person sexually, right? So it's also kind of a concept which encompasses all of the ways you're going to touch them, which will create or foster this IU relationship. So let's read what he has to say about this, and then we're going to try to translate it. I am on page 24, third paragraph, the caress. Who is with me? Wave at me. Okay, thanks. All right, so this is Levinas, okay? This is not Irigaray. She's quoting Levinas, and then she's going to comment. So Levinas says this: the caress consists in seizing upon nothing, in soliciting what ceaselessly escapes its form toward a future never future enough, in soliciting what slips away as though it were not yet. I, or it, and I wish to add this is man's caress, it searches, it forages. It is not an intentionality of disclosure, but of search. Okay, so translation. What does this mean? What is he talking about? Can anyone try and see if you can translate this passage? What is he saying? What is this way of touching that he's describing? Does anyone want to give it a shot and give us an idea of what Levinas is saying here? In fact, well, let me just wait, see a few comments from you guys. What is he trying to say? What is this way of touching? How is the man here touching the woman, or the woman touching the man? How is the two partners, or man or man, or whatever? How are the two partners touching each other in this context? What does it mean when you're, okay, Donaldson, go ahead.
I think it's sort of like implying that there is like no kind of possession or ownership. Like you're respecting the person and like appreciating kind of what each person is giving, and that it's not just one giving to the other, but each person is kind of making an effort to please the other person. Is kind of what I got out of it.
Definitely, right? Consists in seizing upon nothing. It's not about possession. It's not about taking, right? We talked about this, right? It's about soliciting, searching, exploring, right? You are interested here, not so much in offering yourself to the other as in offering the other to themselves. Let me explain. This is very interesting, right? It's not so much you giving to the other, it's you giving the other back to themselves. In other words, as you are exploring them, as you are, really searching, right? What is it that they love, or who are they, right? And as you're discovering them, they are in a way awakened to who they are, right? And Irigaray talks about that a little further. So there's one word in the American language which describes this time that you take to explore the other, to search, to disclose. Anybody know what it is? It starts with an F, and it's not the word you're thinking right now. What's that word in the American language that we talk, that Irigaray is really emphasizing here? That's really what it means when you're taking the time to explore each other, to caress, to touch, to hug, to what's that word in English? Starting with an F. Help you more. F-O. F-O-R. F-O-R-E. I give you half the word now. What's the rest? F-O-R-E-P. Okay, Donaldson. Oh, you're muted.
Is it foreplay?
Yes, excellent. Okay. Irigaray, or Levinas here is talking about foreplay, the importance of foreplay. What is foreplay? Foreplay is not just before. Foreplay is before, during, after, right? Foreplay is, and this is especially, I think, important for men to learn, right? This is because men are more fast, right? Men tend to want to get to the point quickly, right? Women, on the other hand, are much more interested in foreplay, and we'll talk about why in a second, right? But foreplay is basically this, is the time you're taking, right? To explore the other, to awaken the other, to arouse the other. You're caressing them, you're hugging them, you're talking to them, you're doing this before, you're doing this during, you're doing this after, you're taking time. You're not just rolling over, right? And falling asleep, right? You're taking time to still cuddle and talk, right? This is the whole ritual that you are doing around the actual moment of consummation, right? So this is the, in terms of restaurant analogy, this is the appetizer and the dessert. Okay, if you don't have the appetizer and the salad, the soup, and then, and then finally you finish with the dessert and the coffee. And we French people, we know how to do this. The reason we're such good love makers, we're such good eaters, right? You go to a French restaurant, it starts with the soup and the salad, then you have the appetizer, then you have the main course, and then you have the cheese and the bread, and then you have the coffee, and then you have the dessert. That's what I'm talking about. If you guys can pull this off sexually, you're going to be masters, right? If you can pull off the salad, the soup, the salad, the main course, the cheese, the bread, the coffee, and the dessert, you're going to be amazing, right? So that's what he's talking about, right? Let's take our time, just like we take our time to eat in our country, right? In France, we also take our time to make love. So this is what she's trying to teach. Remember, she's from France. She's trying to teach this, right, to the world, right? Just like you want to take time to eat, you want to take time to make love, right? Now, I'm going to talk about why this is important on two levels, especially for the woman. So this is, if you're in a same-sex relationship, it applies a little less, but this is if you're in a heterosexual relationship, this will be very valuable information. For the woman, there are two reasons why the foreplay should not be skipped, even though it is tempting sometimes for the man to rush through and, get a quickie here and there, right? This is why she's saying it's so important, right, to really observe this ritual. And I'm going to look at two reasons. The first one is the ethical reason. And the second one is the reason that has to do with pleasure. Okay, so there are two ways: ethics, pleasure. These are the two reasons. So let's look first at ethics, right? Why is it ethical? And who would have thought, right, that foreplay had anything to do with ethics? It does, right? For the woman, it is crucial that the foreplay is not skipped. Why? Because this is the only way she will feel like an I-you and not an I-it, right? It is very easy, even in a committed relationship, if you rush through the sex, the woman will inevitably feel used and feel like she's just an object, right? So quickies are fun, but most women, they prefer the full course meal, right? And this is the idea, right? What Irigaray is encouraging is saying, listen, if you skip the foreplay too much, too often, right? Of course, okay to have occasional, something else. But if too often you skip it, the woman will begin to feel like she's just an object of pleasure. She is not a real person, right? So she will not feel like a you. She will not feel like she's in an IU relationship. So ethically speaking, psychologically for the woman, it is crucial to, as often as possible, to engage in this ritual, right? And even if you don't have much time, you can still, do the ritual in shorter, as long as the ritual is taking place, you don't have to take 2 hours, right? That's what I'm saying, right? So that's first reason. The ethical reason is if you want to have an IU, or if you want the woman to feel like a you, is very important for her that this ritual, this foreplay take place. But there's another reason also, which has to do with the woman's physical pleasure. And this is something which, sometimes when the men know, sometimes they don't know, right? What often a man doesn't know is that there are regions in the woman's body that can only be opened through foreplay. In other words, if you want her to open up to you without pain, right, you have to take that time, because if the woman is not fully aroused, chances are the sex will be painful, right? And this is why very often you will end up with a partner who's feeling pain, right, as you're trying to be close to her, right? And sometimes the man feels dejected and feels, well, maybe we're not compatible, maybe we're not meant to be together because you're feeling this pain. But actually the pain is simply that the woman hasn't had time to open up, and the foreplay and the time you take to arouse her is fundamental for her full body to open up, so that when you enter her, it is not painful, right? Now, the woman might continue to feel pain even if she's aroused, and this is then deeper psychological traumatic issues that you can work out as a couple, right? There are therapies for that. Pain in intercourse has never anything to do with incompatibility. It's simply that the woman needs more time to open up, and perhaps needs to do some healing work in terms of past trauma, right? But definitely the time you take to arouse her can really help, right? So very important that the man, in a way, there is responsible in a way for the opening up of the woman, and the foreplay is crucial for that. So that's the first thing. Now I want to go a step further. Before I do, any questions on the foreplay element, the ethical, the pleasurable? Any questions? Any clarification? This is your moment to ask all the questions you can't ask anyone, right? You have a sex therapist for you today, 2 hours, right? So this is the moment, right? We can ask Irigaray these questions. I will channel her, right? So if you have any questions, ask them now or maybe after, right? But this is your opportunity. Okay, so going a little deeper in this idea, Irigaray continues and talks about sex in page 26, second paragraph. She says this: the caress, so now she's elaborating on what Levina said, right? The caress, she says, is a gesture word. Let me write this in the chat and we'll think about what this means. Gesture word. Okay, what does this mean? Anybody want to try and give a definition of gesture word? So it's a gesture, so it's a touch, which is also a word. Okay, so here's my question. What's a word? What is language for? Why do you speak? Why do you communicate? What are you trying to do when you communicate with someone? Let's try to figure out what is a gesture word. Anybody know? Rudolph, go ahead.
Well, words and language in itself is means to transmit information.
Okay, very good.
If you look at it in that meaning, then the word caressing can mean that you're transmitting your willingness to be of service, to really selflessly be part of the activity.
Okay, excellent, right? If the caress is a gesture word, the caress is basically a language. A language of what? A language to express what? A language to express love, right? And this is key. Very often, too often, we have forgotten that sex is the expression of love. Sex is a language by which we express love. It's not just empty words. A lot of us, we just go through the motions. but nothing is being expressed, right? What Irigaray is saying, let us not forget that sex is a love language. It is supposed to be the expression of something deep within you that you cannot express with words and only with touch, right? And so she's saying it's very important, therefore, to only speak if you have something to say. In other words, if you're not feeling love, don't have sex with that person, right? Because you will be, it's going to be empty words, right? So here she's emphasizing, right, the importance, if you want to get to the third level, advanced level, where you have intimacy, where you have, you know, an amazing sex life, you cannot bypass the emotional component, right? You cannot bypass the heart. And so she's saying, let us make sure before we say anything that we have something to say, right? That our feelings are on the level of what we're about to say, right? Is your heart saying what your body is saying, right? There needs to be an alignment between your heart and your body if you want to get to that third level, right? The third level is alignment between heart and body, right? And so it's very important, right? Good sex, right, really necessitates a certain level of emotional maturity. And I want to ask you this question on the Song of Songs. We didn't study this passage, but if some of you might have noticed this, this is a good illustration of what I just said. Do you remember when he comes into her garden? Let me put the gallery. Do you remember there's a moment in chapter 4, he enters her garden, and we know here that it's, you know, maybe it's the moment of consummation, you know, probably they're really, you know, finally getting together. Do you remember what he calls her 7 times, gives her this name, the same name, before he enters her garden? Anybody remember what is that name he calls her? It occurs 7 times, and then he goes into the garden. Anybody remember? You can check your text if you want. It's before chapter 4. And I'm running out of battery, which means I'm gonna switch to the bad camera. No, it's not my beloved. Close though. It's more. It's more. It's more than my beloved. It starts with B also. BR. BRI. If anyone gets it. BRID. I practically spelled it out now. What am I spelling? Bride. Thank you, Anderson. Calls her 7 times, my beloved, right? My sister, my bride, right? This comes together. My sister, my bride, my sister, my bride, my sister, my bride, and then he enters her garden, right? So that, and it's like a crescendo in the text, right? So what we're learning from this very ancient text, which remember is the treatise written, I think, by a woman for women, it's different, right? What we're learning there is that emotional maturity is necessary. If you want to have an amazing sex life and you don't have emotional maturity, it's not going to happen, right? You have to be ready to say those words and mean them before you can really have the partnership you're looking for, right? This is why, by the way, I believe it is impossible, and this is an important part here, it is impossible, I believe, to measure sexual compatibility before commitment. Let me explain, right? Many of us are in partnerships where the person says, well, before I can commit to you, I need to make sure we're sexually compatible. How many of you have heard this argument before? Let's see, let me get to gallery. It's a very common argument. How many of you have heard or heard it said that, you know, before we can get together, we need to test sexual compatibility. So let's first sleep together and then we'll decide. Okay, so Donaldson, anybody else? You can raise your virtual hands too. Okay, so yes, this is a very common argument, right? That and many of us, we fall for it. We're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Of course, we should know if we're compatible. Otherwise, you know, what's going to happen, right? And so forth. So what we're learning here is that you cannot really test the compatibility. You cannot really know who you're with, at least when it comes to women, until you have committed. Let me explain. The way the woman is wired, and some women can, you know, disagree with me, and that's fine, but I'm going to push forward with this idea. The way we are wired is that we cannot fully open up until we feel completely safe, until we feel that the person really wants to be there. And so if there is no commitment, we are not going to be fully open. And so what you're going to get is only a stunted version of ourselves, right? And so you cannot really know who she is because she cannot reveal who she is fully before a serious commitment. Do you follow me? Let's see if the males are following. Men, are you with me? Put your hand in the screen. Okay. So this is something you have to know, right? She will try. I mean, she will be willing, and she will really, offer herself the best she can. But parts of her will remain inevitably unconsciously closed, right? And so she will not be fully the full version of her sexual being that she could be. She will not be fully blossomed as a sexual being. And so you can't really know who she is, right? Until there is this commitment, right? And so you can't really test, right? And I say to people, you can't test drive a woman. You can test drive a car. You can't test drive a woman, right? In the same way, now speaking to the women in the class, right? Sometimes we are tempted to give ourselves before any type of commitment has occurred. And then we wonder why the man loses interest very quickly. Okay, let's see if any women have experienced this or heard this. Anybody, when women can relate to this, you give yourself, and somehow after a while the man loses interest, not on his fault. He doesn't want to lose interest, but he does. And then the passion is wanes, right? Anybody can relate to this? Put your hand in the screen. Men also, if you've experienced this. Anybody can relate to, you have sex and somehow you thought it would be the right person, but somehow the passion goes away, and then you end up with, okay, was this really supposed to be, to happen? Very often what we don't realize as women is that if you give yourself before the man is ready to receive you, he will not be able to taste the fullness of who you are. He will not know you. And so it will be easy for him to become disinterested and leave. The only way a man can truly receive a woman is through the commitment, when his heart is open and ready to receive, right? Very often we women give the best of ourselves to men who are not ready to receive because they have not committed, right? And at that point, the man actually has never truly tasted us because his heart has not been open enough to receive us, right? And so this is why I really want to emphasize, right? If you want to get to the third level, you cannot bypass the commitment part, right? It's so powerful. This no exit. I'm going to stay with you no matter what. Let's just work on this, right? Let's make this happen. Let's create this intimacy. Let's create this sexual compatibility, right? Compatibility is something you create. It's not something that is there, right? Now, you're probably wondering, well, I still feel like, so how do we test compatibility, right? If we can't have a relationship, be intimate, and how are we going to test this? How am I going to know if this is the right person, right? I want to point you to an amazing video that I saw that really helped me. It's called 5 Keys to Identifying Your Soulmate. This is by a person called Ture Roberts. I thought this was one of the most powerful videos where he talks about how he found his wife, right? And he was somebody who was very cautious. He didn't want to rush into it. And he found a way to test compatibility very easily without needing to sleep with her. He knew. It's very interesting. It's possible, right? But then he gives 5 keys that you have to check off, right? Before you take the step towards something deeper. And I really want to invite you guys to watch these videos. There's like 1 million views on that video. It's an amazing video where he really shows this is how you can tell that you're compatible. And this is what will give you the guidelines, the guidance to know if you should move forward with that person or not, right? So you don't even need to live with them. You don't need to have even had sex with someone to know if this is going to be the right partner for you. There are ways to check, which he will, I'm just going to leave it in suspense for you to explore. So anyways, so that's right. That's in essence what's a lot of the wisdom that is hidden here in this text. Let me switch to my bad camera so I can charge my computer, which is about to die. Before we lose this lecture. Okay, so that's in essence, right, what Irigaray is saying, giving us a lot of, sorry, let me turn on the camera, is giving us a lot of really amazing things to keep in mind, right, as we explore this journey, as we move from level to level, right? She's really inviting us to leave, to move, to continue to journey from the I-it to the I, right, and eventually to the I-you. And of course, this is a journey which takes risks, right? This is a journey which involves really complete investment, right? You cannot get to level 3 without a complete investment, without taking this dangerous step, right? So that's the invitation. Okay, any questions on anything we talked about? Let's have a little moment for clarification or questions or comments, or anybody want to add to anything I said, confirm, infirm, disagree. Okay, Donaldson, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've I'm affirming all the statements. I feel like, when you're with someone, it's a little bit about learning about them, in order to like get to a level of intimacy that's satisfactory for both people. It requires practice and experimenting and learning and feeling safe and vulnerable with a person. I think is important before you kind of get there. It's necessary, if you will.
Absolutely, right? The sex is easy. It's the intimacy that's hard, right? So anyone can have sex. Animals have sex, right? But intimacy is something that you craft, and it's something that you craft only at a very high price. I want to emphasize, right? The price of intimacy is your whole being, right? There's a very beautiful story in the Gospels, which Jesus tells, which says, there was once a merchant who saw a pearl of infinite value. And he was like, I need this pearl. I have to have this pearl. And he went and sold everything he had, his houses, his lands, his slaves, right? He got rid of everything, took the money, went and bought this pearl, right? This is intimacy. Intimacy is this pearl that you really have to leave behind a lot of what, of your kind of your comfort zone, right? Of your plan B, backup plans, right? Of the people you could be with, right? It involves sacrifice, it involves cutting, right? But and so it is really up to us, right? If we want to experience that, right? We don't have to, right? People can go through life quite contentedly without the intimacy. But if one wants that, it is really a pearl of great value. I was talking to a kid the other day, a young kid, like 17, 18, who was dating somebody. But he just couldn't stop, sleeping with other women. But he loved this woman, right? He really loved her. He wanted it to work, but he just couldn't stop himself. He was tempted and he couldn't overcome, right, the temptation. And we were talking, and I was like, listen, what do you want in life? Do you want Diet Coke or do you want wine? Right? And I told him, you can have Diet Coke. Diet Coke will satisfy you. It's normal drink. You're going to be comfortable. But if you want the wine, you have to purchase it, right? It takes a sacrifice to have the wine. And he was very intrigued, right? And I told him, listen, your girlfriend is giving you the wine, right? But you have to purchase it. You can't go on drinking Diet Coke. You have to leave the Diet Coke to find the wine. And so I was encouraging him, and it was really his decision, right? Yeah, and he, he had to work it out in himself. Do I want wine or am I satisfied with Diet Coke, right? But the wine comes at a very high price, and we have to ask ourselves, am I willing to pay this price, right? Of being selfless, offering myself up, being humble enough to learn from my partner, being able to invest all of myself with no turning back, right? This is the price, right? Okay. Thank you, Donaldson. Any other comments before we conclude? This is our last day together. I'm gonna miss you guys. Hope to see you in other classes. I really do. Okay. Yes, Rudolph, go ahead.
I want to just touch on something Chris and in our group talked about earlier, and maybe I can coax him into joining me to explain this. We were talking about social media and how the message of social media often destroys what we have just been discussing in the last couple of hours, and what perhaps some of the strategies could be, not to be roped in by the rather fake world of social media in this respect. I'm not saying that social media has no good elements, but in respect to relationship building and how we view each other, there is a challenge. And Chris, you said it perfectly. Perhaps I can get you to repeat it one more time.
Chris, whoever you are, because I just know last
Uh,
name.
yeah, as Pierre.
Yeah,
So
go
like,
ahead.
me and Axel, I was just talking about how like social media kind of ruined this like, idea of relationship. I pulled up the example of Andrew Tate and like, and how that a lot of people like kind of follow his ideals, like kind of follow his advice, because he gives like advice on how to be like, you know, the alpha male, how to be the one in charge, and like,
Nice.
and I think we were talking about like I was talking about how like in today's society it's very frowned upon for men to be open with their emotions and their feelings. They have to like take everything at face value. They gotta be like, oh, I am the alpha, I'm the top dog. I cannot show like my weakness to the other or else I'll be frowned upon on. And Andrew Tate kind of like it's like he really like values that this whole tough idea, this like tough style. Like you gotta be tough, you gotta be strong. You can't like show your emotion, you can't show anything like that. And I feel like because since he is quote unquote famous, since he has cars, since he has money, since he has women, a lot of people are like influenced by his ideals and like they want to follow that.
Who is this guy? Can you write his name in the chat? I'm gonna look into him.
Andrew Tate, he's just like I just saw a couple of videos of him online and
Andrew
I
Tate.
think it was just kind of just dumb. Like he's like very popular from like I see a lot of things on my feed of like clips of him, talking like random stuff, like his advice and stuff like that. I
Excellent.
just
Thank you. This is super helpful. In fact, yes, I'll let Donaldson respond, but I'm going to integrate him in my next class. Thank you. This is great. Donaldson, would you like to respond?
That's really funny because our group talked about Andrew Tate last time. And I don't know if you should look it up. I think it's gonna upset you a little bit. It's like
yeah, he has.
he's kind of like a reverse, he's like anti-feminism
Is
to
he
a
like
degree.
red pill? Is it red pill, blue pill? I
Yes,
don't know.
that's the guy with the red pill and the, is it a blue pill?
I don't know the red pill, blue pill stuff. I don't know what either
I think
side is.
that's from the Matrix, and it's like turned into like a
Yeah,
political kind of.
I heard of him. Yes, I heard about
like a
him.
political kind of thing.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Donaldson, do you want to respond to Andrew Tate, or do you want to? Do you have more to
No,
say?
well, I mean, we had a discussion. We like sort of like talked about how like I don't know. I don't really agree with what he's got to say. Like I think there's moments I think when like a man has to be kind of like strong and like defensive and protective like of his partner. But I don't think that should be like the basis of a relationship. Like he's kind of assuming that women look for a man who's going to protect them and just like do everything so that they can be this kind of subordinate partner. And I think it kind of goes against everything we've learned in this class and that how I was raised also. So I disagree with him.
Thank you. Rudolph, what do you have to add?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I don't know who the guy is either. And what Chris left out is a conversation we had about the fact of wanting to be famous or being just happy with who you are. And in the context of what you said earlier, the third level of that kind of love is, and I jotted down some adjectives when you were talking. It's very obliging and considerate and very accommodating. From what I can gather from a person like this guy, he is not very respectful, not tender, not patient, and on the heels of what Jesse just said, chauvinistic, patriarchic, and sees the female sex as the weaker sex. I think when you're saying that a man has to be strong and powerful at times and look out for the other, I think that goes the same way, in a same equal sense, for a woman in the partnership, or two men or two women. It really doesn't have anything to do with the attachment of the word sexuality. It is a really higher level of understanding that goes much deeper than any of the physical needs or emotional needs, all of it together will then get you to the third level.
Excellent. Let me actually add to the conversation by giving you an alternative definition of alpha male. I think he's onto something with the alpha male, but he's defining it incorrectly. The true alpha male, and I learned this recently, I was blown away because I thought the alpha male is aggressive, kind of, chest thumping, gorilla, like in charge, protecting the tribe. But actually, in the animal world, the true alpha male is actually the animal who can negotiate with the outside. In other words, the true alpha male is the one who protects the tribe. And how does one protect the tribe? Not by going to war, right? Not by engaging in aggressive conflict, but in knowing how to negotiate with other tribes to avoid conflict. This is the ultimate protection, right? So the true alpha male actually is the negotiator, is the one who is able to hear the other perspective and kind of, respond to that perspective. Is not the one who's aggressive, is actually the one who's able to take a step back and respond rather than initiate, right? So in the true protector of the tribe is not at all the aggressive one, because the aggressive one will bring the tribe to war and the tribe will be destroyed, right? So the aggressive one is a kind of just a very immature version of maleness. The real leader, right, is protecting the life of the tribe by being a good negotiator with the outside world, and of course within the tribe, right? So if you look at the true elder in ancient societies, he was the negotiator, right? He was never the warrior. The warrior was under him. You never have a warrior leading the tribe, ever. The real leader is always on another level, right? So I think we need to redefine what is alpha male, right? First of all. And of course, second of all, obviously, Andrew Tate, I would be, so interested to have a dialogue and see why he's speaking. Like, I'm curious to learn why he is going in that direction. Like, I would love to speak to him, have a conversation, be like, why would you want to miss out on deeper intimacy, right? Because the level you are on, right, is clearly the it, right? So why would you want to miss out on something deeper, right? Which of course entails this shift to true alpha maleness, right? In my view. Mark and then Rudolph. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you'll be able to talk to him right now because I think he's in jail for some things. Yeah, for being an alpha, let's say, in other countries, and it's caught up to him a little bit. So yeah, that's the one thing. And then also, there's kind of like a whole, I would say like a movement, essentially like the manosphere of like guys who kind of give advice to young men on like how to be in quote alpha or other things, and it's just basically revolved around like the whole chauvinistic like money, women, cars, kind of like that lifestyle and what you need to do. So there's a lot of guys like Jordan Peterson is a little bit kind of involved in it a little bit. There's like a lot of guys that are involved with that, and there's kind of like on the internet, at least in internet culture, like kind of like the sole advice givers, because there's not really another big perspective out there. So people tend to gravitate towards them in response to like I forgot what it's called. Like I think the incels and like different like loneliness that males may feel today in society.
Thank you. You're right. When you say there's no role models, that's why I want to point you guys, especially men. I want to point you to Toure Roberts. I think right now he's the number one person to go to if you want to get some of the perspective, for males of what we're talking about. He's a very interesting person. Went through a lot before he discovered love, right? Went through a failed marriage, remarried, has a blended family, but really is somebody who really, lived life and really did a lot of soul searching, and then really, I think, understood a lot of fundamental truths on how to accompany the new woman, right? He has a lot on that. He has the soulmate, and he has another one, I forgot the name, about the new male, right, that needs to arise in order to connect to the new female, right? So I would really look him up. What is the name of that video where he's talking about the new male? I'll put it in the Blackboard when I find it. But yeah, definitely we need more people speaking to men who have a different voice. And this guy, really, I would point you to him, to Ray Roberts. Rudolph, go ahead.
Interesting to your point of aggression, and it was mentioned in different contexts. I've been thinking about this very often since I work in an environment that is predominantly male, unfortunately, and has very little opportunity to kind of interact with the female world at work. So aggression manifests itself in particular ways. And I have a theory that I'm not sure if it's correct or not, but I think men are generally inclined naturally by their levels of testosterone to be perceived aggressive. And, we've been told over decades and centuries now that it's not good as a man to be aggressive. Lately, for example, in particular, a man's aggression has to be really kept under wraps in order to not do harm in this societal environment that we're in currently. And I agree with it. I'm not in disagreement. What I think, though, needs to happen is that men are waking up to the opportunity to use that naturally occurring aggression and use it as the energy, the driving force to capitalize on their intellectual capacity and learn language and words, and use that to become what you, Professor Dekan, called the defender of the tribe, the collaborator with the environment around. As I think that the epitome of aggression or containing aggression is really to develop the prowess of intellectual capacity and be able to acknowledge different opinions from others, see danger, and deflect it. And when you can be the elder or the learned individual or the grown-up or the adult in the room and say, hold on a second, let's just look at this differently, and here are a couple of ideas how we could solve this, it often brings out the better in many men. And unfortunately, I have to deal with this often during my day, but that's my theory.
I love the way you put it, because instead of demonizing the male sexual energy, right, the testosterone, the aggressivity, right, which is what we do, honestly. And I do have a few words to say about how feminism might have provoked this backlash of people like Andrew Tate, right? And I'll say a few words on that. But I think we have to look at this aggressivity as something beautiful and powerful and vital, right? I'm a Nietzschean in that sense, right? We have to stop, telling men, be girls. This energy is holy, right? But I really think this aggressivity can be channeled, like you said, in the intellect, but also in passion, right? Sure. This is what can make a man incredibly passionate to start a revolution, to save a marriage, right? To build an empire, right? So we have to look at this energy as a holy, sacred life force, instead of telling men, shove it. No, this is a holy passion. This is an energy which can become incredibly life-giving, right? So I disagree with the way that we say men are more aggressive. I would rather say men are more passionate, maybe, or men have, a powerful energy, period. We're not saying more or less, just they have this amazing energy, which can be aggressive, but in a good way too, right? Imagine a man with never mind. I don't think anybody would be happy with a man with no testosterone, right? So our culture, I think, under the influence of feminism, has bashed men a lot. And this is where I think that we as women, I think the strides of feminism, and I say that in the introductory lecture, we have gone far, we have affirmed ourselves, but now it's time to move into the stage of connection, right? It's good to move away from oppression. It's good to move away and become oneself and have, right? And this is what feminism has contributed. But I think we need to move forward and become relational beings and make peace with the men around us, right? Feminism for too long has made men inferior, primitive, idiots, you know. And I see this, by the way, many of my friends who are feminists despise men. There is a culture of despising and demeaning the male energy and the male psyche and making men to be these kind of primitive apes, right? And so I understand people like Andrew Tate who are now reacting, right? So not that he should, I mean, there's a better, I mean, there's a mature way to react, right? But I get it, right? So I think we women need now to also take a step further. Like we're asking the men, we also need to mature. You know, usually in a couple, when one is dysfunctional, there's something going on here too, right? There's always, the dysfunction is always shared, right? So if men are becoming more and more dysfunctional, and we're seeing this with Andrew Tate and so forth, then let's look at ourselves as women. What did we do to provoke that? And now I'm not saying, I know I'm going to hear this, right? Oh, rape is okay when she's wearing a certain, no, right? I'm not saying that we are responsible. I'm saying we need to do some soul searching and see how we can move beyond some of the contributions of feminism, which often lead to the despising of men. There is a discourse which is demeaning to men. I have read it, I have heard it, right? And we need to begin as women to work now into relating to men, right? And not just, right, and respecting and honoring their difference, their specificity, their hormonal makeup, right? So I think we need to work towards reconciliation. It's not enough to bash people like Andrew Tate. We have to also look, you know, what have we done to provoke this? Because we have done some things to provoke it, right? I see, Mark, did you want to say something else, or is that an old hand? No, okay. Rudolph, is that a new hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to add all of that. Yes, I agree with, and I didn't say what I said in order to poo-poo any efforts in feminism. By now, some of you may have recognized that I'm a tremendous supporter of equality when it comes to relationships anywhere in business, in private life, and I'm not poo-pooing movements like the Me Too movement or any kind of feminist movement. I'm also not poo-pooing what this guy, whom I know nothing about, is doing. In his defense, it may be what you just said. But what needs to happen is that men of all ages just have more conversations with each other, honest, sincere, really deep conversations, where they start trusting to each other and do away with the myth that we need to be the most powerful lion in the valley. It's not true. There are many lionesses around who are much smarter than us. And oh, by the way, they do the hunting.
Excellent. Great. Yes, I love it. This is a great discussion, and it's very, I'm glad I had it, because I had some girlfriends who came to me and were telling me about this guy, this Andrew Tate. So I need to read him and or listen. I think it's on YouTube, and you know, maybe address some of that in the teaching next time. So yes, excellent. Great. Anything else before we conclude? We are pretty much out of time. Okay, so thank you guys. This was a great discussion. I learned a lot. I wish you all the best on your love-making journeys. Anyone can stay after class if they still have questions. The rest of you can go. Just bear in mind your test and all your late work is due. And the test has 3 questions, right? Buber, Kierkegaard, Irigaray. And then your essay, of course, is due. And then all of this is due by midnight on Wednesday, and then any late work also. And you can stick around if you want to know what is your late work. So, or if you have any other questions about the course. Okay, so I really hope to see you guys in a class, in a future class. I've told you already which classes I'm teaching. So, and feel free to always drop by, right? If you want to talk, I'm always available after class. So you can always drop by anytime during the semester. If you want to introduce yourself, because I barely met you, you can do that too. So, okay, guys, I will see you guys. Whoever needs to go can go. Whoever needs to stay can stay. And I'll stop the recording.